This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
Hello and welcome to the Unstoppable Indians. Every week we take a journey into the life of an outstanding Indian, a person whose talent, acumen or moral example is transforming India. The best, the finest from every field join me, Madiath, on the show to share their life story, their journey to success, some of the knocks along the way, what made them get up and keep going, what makes them an unstoppable Indian. My guest today is a man who works in the heart of rural Odisha. His organization, Gram Vikas, works in the areas of water, sanitation, tribal development, renewable energy. The list is actually fairly endless. Joe Madiath, Executive Director of Gram Vikas, is my guest today. Mahuda, Behrampur District, Odisha. It's a hot Sunday afternoon in June. The villagers are indoors escaping the heat. They emerge when they see a familiar figure, Joe Madiath. Joe first came to Odisha in 1971 as a relief volunteer post the cyclone. Struck by the terrible poverty, Joe never went home to Kerala. Along with a few friends, he set up Gram Vikas with the goal to improve living conditions in villages. The first experiment was dairy, then a successful foray into biogas, but the main focus of Gram Vikas today is clean drinking water and hygiene. So Joe spends a lot of his energy building toilets, bathrooms and water tanks for the tribals. Villagers are trained to do their own construction work with local material. As a result, they have a new skill set. Of course, waterborne diseases are down drastically. But most important of all, Gram Vikas unites every village it works in. It will not take on a project unless every family is on board. And that, to Joe Madiath, is real inclusion. Joe, thank you very much for joining me on the Unstoppable Indians.
Thank you.
It's great to be right here at the heart of Gram Vikas's headquarters, if I can call it that, in this part of Odisha. When did this sort of journey towards water, sanitation for tribals in rural Odisha actually begin?
You see, right from I began to work in this area, I came to Odisha right in 1971 after a cyclone.
As a volunteer?
As a relief worker. Right from that time, I have been enamored with this concept of inclusion. And the more I saw exclusion and how exclusion was really playing havoc in rural areas, exclusion of women, exclusion of Dalits, exclusion of Adivasis, exclusion of widows. In fact, we thrive and we show our importance in showing how many people we can exclude. The more we can exclude, the more important we are. And that was realizing that gave you a very bad belly. It's a sickening feeling. And from that 1971 onwards, I was interested to see how we could tackle. We began doing agriculture development, lift irrigation, and there was exclusion because in anything with irrigation, anything with agriculture, in that sense, favored the people who had land and did not favor people who did not have land. We went into renewable energy. We constructed over 60,000 biogas plants in Odisha. There again, people only who had cattle could have biogas plants, though it was a very good program, but it did not bring in inclusion. We worked with tribal development. Yes, in the villages where we worked with tribal development, there was sort of inclusion because it brought in everybody into some sort of participation. But replicating inclusion and really taking forward was some dream which I and later on my own organization, Gram Vikas, shared. All of a sudden it occurred to us while we were doing at the end of our biogas, we decided to get out of biogas by hiving it off, spinning it off, and all the employees starting biogas program all throughout Odisha. But when we began to see what we could do, we saw that most people were saying that their biggest problem in Odisha was based on health, or ill health was their biggest problem. When we looked at it, we found that more than 80% of all forms of diseases, ill health, was caused because of their, because of poor quality water. Poor quality of water accounted for more than 80% of the diseases. And then when we looked into the reasons for poor quality water, we found that it was our abysmal attitude to the disposal of human waste. Human waste in its raw form found its way to drinking water and bathing water.
And that was the root of the problem.
That was the root of the problem. Then it occurred to us, my God, maybe this is what we were always looking for, because the waste disposal habits of any particular section, whether it was Dalit women or the Adivasis in a village, in a habitation, affected the quality of water of the others. So, we could very convincingly argue that there has to be 100% inclusion. 100% of the people had to have an approach to sanitation to have better quality drinking water. But then this 100% was a tall order, and even there were very few takers within my own organization when I tried to say that this was needed and this was
what we you're saying is you identified sanitation as the pressing concern. You needed to get the entire village involved, and it had to be all or none. And that thought process then transformed into what we know as Joe Madiath's efforts to build toilets, across rural Odisha. Is that too simplistic a description?
We identified poor quality water as the real problem. To address that, you needed sanitation. But we also realized that in a village, the unhealthy waste disposal, human waste disposal practices of even one family could jeopardize the health of the whole village. So, it has to be 100%. So, this 100% coverage of sanitation of a particular village, so that the village would have always good quality water, was our approach.
So, how did you operationalize it? I mean, if you look at it today, how do you actually go into a village and bring about the water sanitation change that you're looking for?
First of all, we said that any village willing to implement this program would have to raise 1,000 rupees on an average per family. Again, it is on an average. So, the poorest widow of that village who is landless may be giving only 50 or 100 rupees. But on the whole, the others in the village would have to make up for her, and the average of a village has to be 1,000 rupees per family. So, a village of 100 families would be raising a corpus of a lakh of rupees, 1,000 rupees per family. That could not be touched, and that would be put into a bank deposit in the name of a village society that is promoted there with 50% men and 50% women. Because for us, gender equity also is very, very important, social and gender equity. Then in that village, people would gather all the local materials like the rubble for the foundation, the sand, they would bake the bricks, they will bring all other local materials that were required for building a toilet, and something which we have not spoken about, a bathing room. I will come to that. So, and in the meanwhile, all the unskilled laborers, so called daily laborers in that village, would be given an opportunity and given minimum wages to be trained as masons, both boys and girls. So, they would be given while they work minimum wages, and they would be asked to learn masonry. So, it would take about 100 days to teach these boys and girls masonry, and together with the masonry we also taught them plumbing that is needed. Some of them became stone dressers to make granite stone into forms. We also later on began to go into scaffolding, bar bending. So, that is a construction industry which does not need too long a period for people to learn, maximum 100 days. So, by the time masons were ready, the local materials were ready, and people began to construct a toilet and a bathing room for each family. But again, a toilet and a bathing room which you or I could use. We did not, because most of the toilets in the name of total sanitation campaign that is being created in India, I do not think, more than, my estimate is that at least in Odisha not more than 2 or 3% really is being used. So, it is a terrible waste. We will achieve the millennium development goals as far as numbers is concerned, but ultimately we will achieve very little. It will be a case of operation successful, patient dead.
How many such toilets, bathing rooms in how many villages across Odisha are we talking about today?
We have constructed as on 31st of March 698, we are constructed in 698 villages, which is about nearly 50,000 families in Odisha. And the other component is water. Again, there is a prevailing feeling that a poor village woman, even if she spends 3 to 4 or even in summer months 5 to 6 hours hauling water for the household, and unfortunately bringing water for the household is gender denominated. It is a woman's work. So, in summer months some of our tribal villages which are perched on top of hills, the women spend about 7 to 8 hours taking this water, back-breaking drudgery of the villages, and I do not see why in today this is necessary. So, every village that we construct this toilets, bathing room, in some form we will see that, we do see that water is brought to every toilet, safe water is brought to every toilet, every bathing room and every kitchen or just outside the kitchen 24 hours a day, just like their sisters in the cities and towns.